Hi, everyone. We're just going to give a few seconds for everyone to come in. But thank you for joining so far. We are here for the 3K, pre-K, and other preschool options webinar. And again, just going to give everyone a few seconds to come in. And I will launch a poll in just a few seconds as well. I also want to introduce myself. My name is Diana Imbert. I am a staff attorney here in the Early Childhood Education Project at Advocates for Children. I will be doing the first half of the webinar, and then I will be joined by my colleague, Betty Baez-Mello, who will also be on the webinar as well. Okay. So again, we're just giving a few minutes for people to join us. It is 10 in the morning on a pretty gray day. So we'll just give everyone a few more seconds. All right, and just a reminder that we are here to talk a little bit about the different preschool options that exist. And so just want to make sure that everyone's here for the right webinar. We'll begin in just a few seconds. Again, just giving everyone the opportunity to join. Okay, and we are also going to launch a poll just to get a little bit more of an understanding of who everyone in the audience is. So if you can, we are asking if you're a student, a parent, educator, or another professional, and where in New York do you live? This will help us make sure that we're just tailoring the webinar to the individuals who are in attendance. Okay. So once again, my name is Diana Imbert. I am a staff attorney here in the Early Childhood Education Project. Today, we'll be talking about 3K, pre-K, and other preschool options. And I just launched a poll where you guys can answer just questions about who you are and where do you live. I'll actually move us to that slide. All right, so got some results here. It seems like there's a lot of educators and other professionals in the room coming from lots of different boroughs except for Staten Island. And the other individual, there's one person who might be outside of New York City. This is a very New York City, it is a New York City specific webinar. So just a heads up for the individual who may not be from New York. And we are going to get started. Okay, I'm going to ask just a couple of more questions. So what is your ethnicity and what is your race? Are just another poll that we launched. And again, just going to give people a few more seconds to continue trickling in. But in the meantime, if you can answer that poll, that would be great. Okay, so a good mix of individuals in the crowd. Thank you again for answering those questions, and we are now going to get started. We actually have a few more questions, and so asking just around federal disability categories. Do any of the following federal disability categories apply to your child or your children? And you can select all that apply. Just going to give a few seconds for everyone to answer that poll. Okay. Okay, and since we're getting started, thank you for everyone for answering that question. As we get started, I want everyone to know that we will be sharing these slides at the end of our presentation to make sure that everyone has it. The slides do have hyperlinks where you can easily access the material that we were talking about throughout today's webinar. Also, we will be answering questions throughout the webinar, so please feel free to use either the chat function or the Q&A function. As my colleague and I will both be going back and forth answering questions. There will also be periods of time throughout the webinar that I will stop to see if there are any questions that make sense to ask to the entire group so that we can discuss together. And if not, then we of course will move forward. And so with that being said, let's look at an overview of what we will talk about today. So this is an overview of today's workshop and kind of our agenda. So we've already done introductions. Again, my name is Diana Imbert. I'm a staff attorney here at Advocates for Children in the Early Childhood Education Project. From then, we'll talk about Department of Education run 3K and pre-K programs. From there, we'll talk about the application process for those programs, talk a little bit about special populations, which include students in temporary housing, students in foster care, students with disabilities, and dual language learners. And then we'll go on to talk about early learn, Head Start, and then finally leave you with some resources that we think are really important that really kind of touch base on the information that was covered today. And obviously this is a lot to cover, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so first, I want to talk a little bit about Advocates for Children. So Advocates for Children is an independent agency that protects the rights of all New York City students. We were actually founded in 1971 by parents of students with disabilities. And our mission over the last 50 years has expanded to be much broader. So we ensure high quality education for all New York City students who face barriers to academic success with a strong focus on students from low income backgrounds. And some of the services that we offer is we have a helpline. The number is here. It's 1-866-427-6033. You can call us from Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Although we are always open and available, you can always leave a voicemail. We also offer free legal services to low-income families. We have guides and resources, which can be found on our website. And then workshops and trainings similar to the ones that we are doing, the one that we are doing today. And then lastly, we do policy advocacy and impact litigation to really expand our reach beyond just individual people and cases. Okay. So we'll be covering a lot of the primary early childhood education options in New York City for children under 5 years old. And so these are the various early childhood education program options that exist: 3K, pre-K for all, early learn, and Head Start. It's important to note that the Department of Education runs 3K, pre-K for all, and early learn, and some Head Start programs, and that some schools may offer more than one of the programs and even up to all 4 of these programs at any time. Okay. So we'll be starting with talking about Department of Education's 3K program. So as it states, it is run by the Department of Education. It's a free full-day program that goes for about 6 hours and 20 minutes each day. It starts in September of the year that your child turns 3. So if your child was born in 2020, they would be eligible for a 3K seat this September. However, although all children are eligible to apply, not all children are guaranteed a seat. We'll talk a little bit more in the next slide about the various districts where you are guaranteed a seat for now. But again, not all children are guaranteed a seat. And some programs also offer extended hours and year-round services. We'll talk a little bit about that as well as the presentation goes on. So the children who are in the following school districts are guaranteed a seat in a 3K program. So for the Bronx, that would be District 7, 8, 9, and 12, Brooklyn 14, 16, 19, 23, and 32, Manhattan 1, 4, 5, 6, and of course, in order for you to know where your child's school district is, you can actually call 311 and ask them for that information, or you can visit My Schools. We will actually have a link and talk a little bit more about what My Schools is in a few slides. And again, these various school districts is where your child would, if you live in this school district. So if you call 311 or visit My Schools and realize that you are in school district 4, which is East Harlem, then you know that you are guaranteed a seat to, if you have a child who will be turning 3, who was born in 2020 and will be turning, who is already 3 and eligible to go to 3K. If you are not in these districts, these other school districts where you're not guaranteed a seat, you will, they will try to get as many families a seat as possible, but it is just not guaranteed yet. However, these programs are expanding, and the hope is that over time, every child will be guaranteed a seat. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about where these various 3K programs exist and the different settings in which they can be found. So for district schools, in district schools, you can find 3K programs, and these are schools where kids go beyond, obviously 3K and pre-K. They'll have elementary schools, and these are obviously just kind of neighborhood public elementary schools, and they're overseen by the school's principal. 3K programs can also exist in pre-K centers. Pre-K centers are also run by the Department of Education. They offer pre-K and 3K classes only. So obviously these schools do not offer programs beyond the 3K and pre-K classes. Then there are the NYCECs, which are New York City Early Childhood Education Centers, which are community-based organizations. There's also Family Childcare, which is a home-based program with licensed professionals for children from birth to age 3. And then lastly, charter schools, which are public schools that are run by a board of trustees and not by the Department of Education, but they do have 3K programs, which we'll talk about again in a little bit. And I'm going to just quickly stop and see if there are any questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but just want to remind everyone that if you do have a question, please make sure to put it in the chat or in the Q&A so that we make sure to cover it if there is any questions. Okay. And now I'm going to ask you a question. Oh, excuse me. No, I'm not going to ask you a question yet. So for pre-K for all, we're just going to move on. So obviously we just talked about 3K, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about pre-K for all. So similarly to 3K, this is a free full day program that runs for about 6 hours and 20 minutes. It is also run by the Department of Education. It starts in September of the year that your child would turn 4. So in this case, children who are born in 2019 would be eligible for a September 2023 seat in pre-K. And unlike 3K, all children who apply to pre-K will actually be guaranteed a seat. So there is no division around districts that have that are guaranteed a seat or not, right? Every single child that applies, if you put in the application, will be guaranteed a seat in a pre-K program. And similarly, again, to 3K, some programs do offer extended hours and year-round services. So we'll talk a little bit about where pre-K settings are. And obviously, we've talked a little bit in depth about what these various programs are, but similarly to 3K, you can find these programs in district schools, which are just neighborhood and local neighborhood schools that is run by a principal. You can find pre-K programs at pre-K centers that again are just run by the Department of Education, and they only offer pre-K and 3K classes. And then you can find these programs again in NYCECs, which are the early education centers that are community-based organizations. And then lastly, again, charter schools will also have pre-K programs. So these are the 4 different settings that you could find pre-K programs in. Okay. And then throughout the city, there are some 3K and pre-K programs that actually offer longer school days beyond the 6 hours and 20 minutes that we talked about. They can offer them for up to 10 hours a day. And they also offer programs that are year round. So beyond just the time frame that is usually, so they would also go to school in the summer. And these programs exist for families who qualify based on financial need and other factors. They are free or low cost, and they are located in NYSEEKs and family childcare. For family childcare, it only applies for 3K programs, not for pre-K program. Not for pre-K programs. And then these programs will also exist in school districts. If you apply to these programs, you will be asked to answer questions about your eligibility, right? Because you have to qualify based on financial need and other factors. So they will essentially ensure that you meet their eligibility. And then when you go to register, they will ask you to show proof of that financial need or any other expectations. And then just so that you know, we will go over some of the eligibility factors later in this presentation when we talk about Early Learn and Head Start programs. And I should just mention that extended day, these programs are either called extended day/year, or they could be called Head Start as well. Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about just what these programs are and where they exist, we're going to talk a little bit more now about the actual process of applying for the program. And so this is just an overview of the application process for 3K and pre-K. So step one would be researching and exploring the various options of schools that exist. From there, you will then talk about, you would go through the process of applying for these programs. You can rank up to 12 programs in the application. And then you'll get an offer around late spring and pre-register your child. And then we'll talk a little bit about also what the wait list looks like when you did not get into the school of your choice, and kind of want to hope to see if your child will get into the school of their choice. It's also important for us to note, just because we have been talking about charter schools as a potential setting where a pre-K or a 3K program may exist. Although you will be able to find options of 3K and pre-K programs that exist in charter schools, you will not be able to apply through the Department of Education's 3K and pre-K applications to charter schools. They have kind of a separate process that we will talk about again later in the presentation. So when we talked about researching and exploring different options of the schools that exist, these are sort of the 3 top tools that we highly recommend, that we find that parents find most useful in the researching of schools. So the first is that myschools.newyorkcity, and then the Department of Education's website, which is linked here as Find a School. And again, these are all hyperlinks. So as you can see, when you actually get these presentations, you will just be able to quickly click on these hyperlinks, and it'll take you directly to the website for My Schools and the website for the DOE, along with the admissions guide that we will talk about as well. So the good thing about the DOE website and the My Schools is that you can search for programs that are pretty close to your address. So you can really kind of search to see if you're trying to, let's say, find a school or program for your child near your job, you could search using your job address. If you want to find one near home, you can search looking through home. So it's a really good kind of search feature that you can use. In myschools.newyorkcity, you can also find contact information for each program and information on the services that they may offer. The other good thing about My Schools is that you can also star things, which means that as you are really researching schools and just kind of looking at different schools, you can favorite or star it so that you can remember the schools that you did like, and then easily access it as you are then putting in the information for your application. And then the admissions guide really does talk about different program settings and resources for the 2023 sort of New York City public school year. This admissions guide will cover early learn, 3K, pre-K, and even also include older grades as well. But again, we'll have sections of the things that we are talking about today. So all of these 3 things are places that you can go to really kind of investigate and search what school would be best for your child. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about My Schools in particular, because we do think it is an incredible resource to use to research and look at schools. Also important to know is that there are no printed directories. So you really are going to use this link to access the directories. And then that most programs are not conducting sort of in-person tours as a result of the pandemic still. But obviously you should call schools and find out if they have that option, and that many schools will offer virtual or open sessions or information sessions. And so our biggest recommendation is really just to contact each school to see what their capacity is for you to tour the school, or at the very least answer the questions that you have about the schools if it goes beyond information that you might not be able to see on My Schools or any of the other tools that we have provided today. Okay, so obviously I've been talking a lot about My Schools, and so I want to talk a little bit more about this particular tool. So again, My Schools is a directory. And so the map, as you can see here, will show programs near a particular address. And it'll list programs that appear by name, the type of program that it is, and kind of other important information. So as you can see at the bottom here, from the Shining Bright Nurturing Space at 100 West 31st Street, you can see that that is a 3K extended day / year program. You can see that it has this little barrier accessible. You can see that it is in a NYSEEK program and that it is in District 2. So this is like really a kind of critical information that you will get. And then you can click on the school and or click on this and find more information. You can also, what's really great is that you can filter by subway. You can filter by the district of the school itself. You can filter by the program type. So if you are really like, I want to put my child and make sure that my child is in a NYSEEK, or I qualify financially for a NYSEEK and that's what I want, you can try to search based on just that specific feature. And then obviously looking for things as well as searching for whether or not the program offers year round. And then you can also get more program information via My Schools. So you get, again, the type of program, the location, the contact information. So if I want to call a school to see if I have more questions, or if I want to go see the school, again, My Schools will have that information for you. It'll give you a quick quality snapshot of the school itself. And then some of the other features that you can find out is like whether they offer year round, extended hours, the different languages. And then I think I mentioned this before, but just want to reiterate that NYSEEKs do have income or other eligibility requirements because they're funded through Head Start or childcare. And so when you go to myschools.New York City or even 3K Finder, you will note that it will have the kind of requirements of these NYSEEKs. And then you should be able to contact these NYSEEKs before applying just to make sure that you're eligible and that you meet those requirements. But you can find the requirements in these various tools as well. All right, so we have covered a lot, and I am going to ask a quick poll here. So the DOE provides busing to preschoolers attending 3K and pre-K in the following locations: district schools, pre-K centers, NYSEEKs, all of the above, or none of the above. So I'm just going to ask you to answer that question. Okay, just going to give everyone a few more seconds, and then we are going to see how we did. All right. So many of us answered all of the above, and the answer is actually, although many of us also got none of the above, but the answer is none of the above, E. So the DOE actually does not provide busing to preschool students, except when the preschool student is under very specific circumstances, when the preschool student is a student with a disability who is attending attending special education programs. And there are very limited circumstances for students in temporary housing and children in foster care who might receive busing. So one of the things that you may want to consider when you're thinking about 3K and pre-K programs is to actually think about how far that program is and how you would be getting your child to that program on an everyday basis. Because again, busing is not guaranteed, and again, is only provided under very special circumstances. And so now that we have learned how to kind of research schools and explore schools and make sure that we are creating the best list of schools that we are interested in applying to, we'll talk a little bit about the actual applications themselves. So 3K and pre-K applications for the 2023 to 2024 school year are due by March 10th. Again, to apply to pre-K programs, your child should have been born in 2019. In order to apply to 3K programs, your child should have been born in 2020 if you're applying for the 2023 to 2024 school year. To apply to these programs, there are 3 ways to apply. You can apply online with My Schools. And if you apply through My Schools, you will also have access to apply in the language, in the 10 most common languages of the Department of Education, which are English, Arabic, Bengali, Chinese, Haitian Creole, French, Urdu, Spanish, Russian, and Korean. So those are available through My Schools, and you can apply again in those languages. You can also apply via phone by calling this number that's listed here, 718-935-2009. Interpretation services are available in more than 200 languages if you do apply over the phone. So again, beyond just those 10 languages that I listed, you can use the phone option if you need a language that is not one of the ones that we listed. And you can ask questions and request information about admissions in any language when you call. You can also go to a family welcome center, and they will also help you in the process of applying for the 3K and pre-K program. And the other important thing to know is that the March 10th deadline is it's not a rolling basis. It's not a first come, first served when you're applying. As long as you apply by March 10th, then it means that you have met the deadline and your application will be considered the same as the person who applied. Again, let's say that you applied March 8th, that application will be considered the same as somebody who applied now in February, on February 22nd. So it does not matter as long as you get the application in by March 10th. And it's important to note that the admissions to these schools will be based on certain admissions priorities at the various program settings that we will talk about in just a second. But before I do that, I just want to make sure that there are no questions, or see if there are any questions. Betty's on, so there might be.
Hi, so I've answered the questions that came through the Q&A. I just wanted to do a recap because some of them are probably fairly universal. Some of you have asked about attendance, or one person asked about attendance. We can provide our certificate of attendance at the completion of the webinar. Diane and I, as hosts of the presentation, aren't responsible for managing that component. So for those of you who joined late, for example, if you unfortunately just joined 30 minutes in, can't guarantee that we'll be able to provide the certificate of attendance, or the certificate may say you were only present for a part of the presentation. But you can follow up when you receive that email with all of the information that we'll send after the webinar. You can reply, follow up with our office to ask about that certificate. And then with respect to My Schools, it does not give specific information about what special education services are in 3K and pre-K programs. We will go over students with disabilities in a moment later in this presentation. All students with disabilities are encouraged to apply to 3K and pre-K, and those programs can and do serve children with disabilities. Children can receive, for example, their SEAT and related services at any 3K and pre-K program, regardless of the setting, in NICES, in district schools, in a charter school, across the board. There are then some specialized programs for children who need more intensive supports. But that's why My Schools doesn't go into what special education services are provided, because that really is driven by the child's IEP. And again, we'll go over that later in the presentation.
Thanks, Betty. Okay, and again, very helpful. So if you do have a question, just put it onto the chat or the Q&A feature. Betty will answer them as time goes on. And then again, if there are any ones that seem applicable, like just happened now, we will try to bring it just to make sure that we are answering any questions that are coming up. Okay. So we've talked a little bit now about the process, about how to explore schools and how to apply to schools. And so wanted you to know, as you are thinking about applying to schools, I should say programs, applying to programs, what various admissions priorities they are based on where the program is housed. So I'm going to start with district schools first. And as I mentioned before, district schools, both 3K and pre-K programs exist within district schools. And so their process for admissions is, and again, just important to note that for families who list a very specific program on their application, the way that it works is that the students in that first priority group will be accepted first before groups in other priority groups, and then the list will keep going on. Again, if you have too many students, that's the way that they make their decisions. It's based on the admissions priorities that we will talk about today and right now. And so for district schools, the way that they make their decisions is that they make their decisions if the student, so I'm going to start with just pre-K, because if you're a current student who is attending the 3K program, if it exists, then you would be in the first admissions priority group. If you are, and then the next admissions priority group is a zone student who has a sibling at the school. So again, first admissions priority is a current student who attends the 3K program, if you're applying for pre-K. Then the very next admissions priority group is a student who is zoned at that school and also has a sibling that attends this district school. And again, that's a sibling that could be in second grade or any of the grades in the district school. And also important to note that a sibling in this case is a very broad definition of sibling. It includes half siblings, it includes step siblings, foster care siblings, really anyone who's living in the same household as the student. Then the next admissions priority group is all other zone students. So obviously zone students who do not have a sibling at the school, but are zoned to go to the school. The next admissions priority group is for students who are not zone students, but are within the district of that school and also have a sibling, again, attending that school. Then after that, the next admissions priority group is for out of district students, but who have a sibling that attend that school. Then from then on, the next admissions priority group are all other students that are in that district. And then lastly, all other students who exist outside of that school district. So again, as the school is deciding, depending on the applications that it gets, what space it has for what students, it uses these admissions priorities to try to determine who gets in first, then who gets in after that. And again, this is for specific district schools. Next, we will talk about what the admissions priorities are for pre-K centers. So again, pre-K centers do not hold any programs, do not have any other programs other than the pre-K and the 3K programs. And so we're going to talk a little bit first about the admissions priorities when it comes to pre-K. So for pre-K centers, this is the order that they use in order to admit students based on how many applications they have and how much space they have. So the first priority group here is current students. So similarly, again, students who attended the 3K for all at this particular pre-K center would be the first students who would get an automatic, would essentially get into that first admissions group and be accepted first over other students that apply. The second admissions priority group would be students who live in the same district as a pre-K center. And then lastly, it would be students who live outside of the district. So that is the order in which they would be accepting students when it comes to pre-K. Again, in this case, no conversations around zone schooling, just about whether or not you are in the district, out of the district, and if you're a current student. For 3K admissions into pre-K centers, the way that they work is that the first priority admissions group are for children who live in the district and who will have a sibling at the pre-K center. So that's admissions priority number 1. Number 2 are children who live outside of the district, but who have a sibling at the pre-K center, right? So this would be a 3 and a 4-year-old. And then admissions priority group number 3 is for other children, all other children who live in the district. And then lastly, all other children who live outside of the school district. So again, another kind of breakdown in the admissions priority, and this is specific to pre-K centers. we'll talk a little bit about NYSEEKs, the community-based programs, and what their admissions priorities are. So these programs accept students in the following order of priority. The first are current students who are enrolled at the NYSEEK, who attended the program for either infants and toddlers or 3-year-olds during the 2020 to 2022 school year. Oh, sorry, 2022 to 2023 school year. And then the second priority group are for the siblings of current students who are enrolled at the NYSEEK. The third is for families that receive social services from the organization. So if they are receiving any other free or subsidized social services from the NYSEEK, then that family would have the third admissions priority. The fourth are for students who speak a language other than English that the NYSEEK specializes in serving. And then lastly, all other students who would apply to the NYSEEK. Okay, so we have now covered the admissions priorities for all of the various programs that exist. And so now I'm going to ask a question. So this is a true or false question. Children who attend a pre-K program in a district school are guaranteed a seat in that school for kindergarten. Okay, so we did great here. Well, we kind of did half and half here, but the answer is actually false. So your child's attendance at a pre-K program at a Department of Education district school does not guarantee that he or she can attend the same school for kindergarten. They would actually have to apply to the kindergarten admissions process, and they have the same, the kindergarten admissions process also has admissions criteria like the ones that we just talked about. And so that would be sort of how, what determines whether or not the child gets a seat in kindergarten. I will say that in order for pre-K programs, if you're attending a pre-K program at your zone school, it does not make your child any more likely to be admitted to the school for kindergarten. But if they are attending a pre-K at a school that is not your zone school, that may actually increase your child's chance of being admitted to the same school for kindergarten based on the kindergarten admissions priorities. Okay, so important to note. Okay, so talk a little bit about the application process and the offers and registrations that exist. So once you apply to these programs, you're going to receive an offer in late spring. And again, all families who apply for pre-K should receive an offer, but not all families who apply to 3K are obviously going to be guaranteed a seat. It will depend on what district you live in, and then what room the other districts that do not guarantee a seat have in order for you to get in. So once you receive an offer, you should accept the offer and register for the program. Once you register for that program, if you apply through My Schools, you're going to get a notification in My Schools that where you were accepted. And it's important to note that once you accept the offer and register by the date of the offer letter, you are not giving up the other schools that you were waitlisted, that you were not accepted to. So let's say that you got into a school that was number 3 on the list, on your list, then you will automatically be waitlisted to offer number 2 and number 1, and you will begin to hear throughout the summer about whether or not you get off the waitlist for that school, and then have the choice of either going to the school that you got off the waitlist for or going to the school that you've already pre-registered your child. But important to note that registering your child only reserves a seat and does not actually remove them from being considered for a waitlist. Okay. In terms of registering your child at the school, you will need to, again, accept the offer and then pre-register your child. In order to pre-register them, this is everything you will need. So you will need 1 proof of your child's age, a birth certificate, a passport, a record of baptism. You'll need 2 proofs of address. That's a lease, a deed, a mortgage. Please note that things like magazines will not be considered sufficient to meet proof of address. You never need to provide proof of citizenship or social security number in order to register your child. And if you are, if you are a student in temporary housing, you should note that you have a right to immediate enrollment. They cannot necessarily, they cannot ask for paperwork because obviously you may not have these documents easily accessible. And so it should not hold up your ability to register your child. Okay, oops, excuse me. And then, my apologies here. Okay. And then for, lastly, I want to talk a little bit about applying to charter schools because that's something that we brought up. So again, you can find the charter school pre-K option programs on myschools.New York City. But again, you won't be able to use the 3K, Department of Education's 3K and pre-K applications in order to apply. So you would actually have to contact the schools directly to apply. Most applications are due by April 1st. And they usually do admissions by lottery. So it's not like the admissions priorities that we talked about, but instead by this lottery system. All right, and we've covered a lot again, so I'm just going to stop and see if there's any questions. And I don't see any, so I'm actually going to invite my colleague Betty to come back on to take the second half of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. I don't see any questions, so if you can go to the next slide. We're going to start with a poll. So just keep going with the trivia. Which of these students are considered students in temporary housing? And please select all that apply. Students living in a shelter, student doubled up with friends or relatives because they lost their housing and can't afford housing, a student living in a motel, and D, student living in a park or public place. We'll give everybody a moment to respond to the poll. And just to let you know, we will be going a little quickly through the remaining slides to make sure that we can end on time. So please, during this portion, make sure to use the Q&A and the chat function if you have any questions or feel that something wasn't covered. Okay, and it looks like a good amount of you have responded already. So thank you. The correct answer is all of these, right? So that's why we're asking you basically to select all of them. Students in temporary housing include students who are homeless, and by law, the McKinney-Vento Act specifically, this includes students living in a variety of different housing situations, including living in a shelter, families who are doubled up, families living in a motel, a park, public place, families living in public transit. So it is a wide definition. I think the one that is less frequently known about or understood is the students or families who are doubled up with friends or relatives for the key reason that because they lost their housing or they can't afford housing. And we go over this because there are additional rights for children in temporary housing. First and foremost, we want you to know that students in temporary housing can and should apply to 3K and pre-K for all using the same application as other families. And you can apply by using your temporary address. So you can call 311, you can log into My Schools, put in your temporary address to find what that zone school would be and what your district would be. And that would apply for, that counts towards the admissions priorities, right? Your temporary address can make you eligible for top priority to a district school or to different pre-K centers in that area. As an additional right, students in temporary housing have the right to register even if the family is missing documents. So Diana went over that list of registration documents that families generally need, including proof of age of the child, proof of address. Families in temporary housing may not have access to those documents, so they're allowed to register the child and get additional time in order to secure those documents. Similarly, students in temporary housing have a right to immediate enrollment. So those same documents for registration that are needed for enrollment, again, here, families in temporary housing should be given time or a grace period in order to secure those documents. And in the meantime, the child is allowed to participate in the program. So the child can start attending the 3K or the pre-K program while the family works on getting a copy of the child's birth certificate or other records, and including for enrollment, vaccination records that may be needed. Students in temporary housing have the right to school stability, so they can stay in a program even if they change their address. So even if a family is moved to a different shelter, if a family has to change address to live with in another doubled up situation with other friends or families, or hopefully if they secure permanent housing, the child has a right to school stability, so can remain in their 3K or pre-K program, even if they would no longer have the top priority to have been admitted into that seat, right? So even if the child was going to a pre-K program in their zone school, and now that would no longer be their zone school, can continue to attend that preschool program throughout the remainder of the year. To facilitate that, families in temporary housing also have a right to transportation. For most families, this is done by giving them a monthly Metro card, and it's provided to the parent. So we're talking about 3 and 4 year olds. So someone does have to escort the child, obviously, to school. Parents can request the Metro card from the child's preschool program or to their regional managers. And this is a hyperlink here that we have to who the regional managers are in the DOE office. There is potential possibility for busing for certain students in temporary housing, but that is usually limited to students attending a district school where they also have a sibling attending, because there's already a bus route in those situations. And so for help, if you have any questions about how to support students in temporary housing, please call AFC's helpline, and families can also contact the regional managers. They are by borough and by district, so they are a key resource for families in temporary housing. Okay, students in foster care have many similar rights to students in temporary housing. They also have a key resource, which are the foster care agencies that work with them. And we raise the foster care agencies as a key resource because many of them have a case planner or education specialist that helps the family navigate all the early childhood and all the early childhood program options that are available. And many of the foster care agencies will actually proactively apply with families to 3K and pre-K programs, will assist with the application and the enrollment process. So if you are the parent of a child in care, or if you are a professional supporting a family, please make sure to contact the foster care agency if the child is in care. And like I said, many similar rights to students in temporary housing, including a right to immediate enrollment. If there's an open seat, they have to let you enroll your child and allow a grace period for you to provide any of the documentation necessary to complete the enrollment process. There's a right to school stability. So even if the child changes foster home, goes back to their parental care or other changes in their living status, the child can remain, has a right to remain at their preschool program despite a change in address. And for that same purpose, for school stability, there is a right to transportation. Again, here it's usually through Metro cards provided to a parent or guardian. Families can contact their foster care agency for support with this, contact the foster care agency or the preschool for support with the Metro cards. Limited possibility for busing, again, for 3K and pre-K programs located for the most part in district schools where they may be already a sibling, right? And that's why there's already a route in place. And again, if any questions on these populations, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. Students with disabilities, I'm going to repeat myself, can and should apply to 3K and pre-K programs. Although the directory does not specify what special education services are available at any given program, that is because the special education services are driven by a child's IEP. And so children have a right to receive their special education services, the services recommended on their IEP in any and all 3K and pre-K programs. And for the most part, for children in these programs, if they have a recommendation for SEEIT or related services like speech, OT, physical therapy, counseling, they can receive those programs at any 3K and pre-K setting. If a child attends 3K or pre-K in a district school, usually the providers for that school, the same providers that work with kindergarten to 5th grade, that speech therapist will also see the preschool child. For children attending programs at NYSEEKs that don't have in-house staff that can provide those services, the DOE is responsible for sending those providers to the programs to work with all the children who need those services there. Additionally, children should not be disciplined. We can go back. Children should not be disciplined because of their disability. So a program should not be truncating a child's schedule, should not be removing a child from a classroom, should not be asking the parent to come and sit in with the child. Those are not allowed for any child, but in particular for children with disabilities, they shouldn't be punished because of their disability or their needs. So programs should provide as well behavioral support, and the DOE can send additional behavioral supports to a program to make sure that the child's needs are being met in that 3K and pre-K program. Children with disabilities can also, in certain cases, get admitted to programs that are already full. Programs can add a seat for a child with a disability if there are no other programs in the area that have a seat available. Children with disabilities have the right to an accessible program. We went over that in My Schools, gives information on accessibility, whether, for example, children with mobility or vision or hearing needs that need a program to have special accommodations or all be in one floor, be in an open floor plan. My Schools will indicate what district schools and pre-K centered accessibility options are. Families should contact NYSEEKS directly and family childcare options directly to see what their accessibility options are. But children do have a right to an accessible program. So if you do not get one through the 3K and pre-K process, you should follow up with the DOE to make sure they're providing you one that is appropriate. And so to get help, we recommend that families of students with disabilities contact their CPSC administrator. This is a person who helps develop the preschool IEP, and can also contact the DOE Special Education Office at this number, 718-935-2007. Some students with more significant needs may require a more supportive setting than what 3K and pre-K can offer. For example, 3K classes are usually 17 or 18 students in a classroom with a general education teacher. Some students need a much smaller classroom. So 3K and pre-K have gen ed teachers. Some children need a special education classroom with a special education teacher and a smaller student to teacher ratio. Some of these options include a special class in an integrated setting, which is a smaller class than 3K and pre-K. It's for students with and without IEPs, and there's a full-time special education teacher in the classroom. The DOE also offers special classes, which are classes of just 6, 8, or 12 students, all for children with IEPs and a full-time special education teacher. If a child's IEP recommends one of these program options, then the DOE is responsible for identifying a program for the child. Families do not apply to SCIDS programs or special class programs through the 3K and pre-K application process. You only apply to general education programs through the 3K and pre-K application process. If a child needs one of these specialized programs, again, the CPSC administrator is responsible for finding that program for the family, and you should have an opportunity to tour the program. As an additional benefit, families of children with disabilities attending a SCIDS class or a special class have a right to transportation, and that is busing. The DOE is required to provide busing to these programs. And if you have any questions about busing, you can contact the DOE at early childhood busing at schools.nyc.gov with transportation questions. Okay. Another quick trivia, just to make sure you're still with me. Families of children with disabilities should not apply to 3K or pre-K for all until after they've had their IEP meeting. This is a true or false. Okay. You've answered false, and that is correct. So everyone who responded correctly. Families of students with disabilities have the same deadline to apply to 3K and pre-K, which is March 10th. So encourage you to do so by that deadline. Your child can receive the services recommended on their IEP if it's SEEIT and related services at any 3K and pre-K program. And children who need a more specialized setting will be offered one through the Department of Education through the CPSC administrator. And at that point, the family can decide to turn down the general education placement and get the more intensive or seek the more intensive program. So quickly, we'll go over emergent multilingual learners. This is a term for young children who are learning more than one language at the same time. Usually it's for children who are speaking a language other than English in the home. The DOE has dual language programs for pre-K, so for 4-year-olds. These are programs where instruction is in English and another language, and the goal is to help children learn both languages at the same time. So it's pretty well split in terms of the instruction and the activities being done in both languages. There are not yet dual language programs for 3K, or at least not that you can apply to through the application process, although we do hear that there are some pilots underway. Many more programs offer enhanced language supports. And these are, to get in detail what those language supports are, you have to contact each program specifically. They are mostly offered in NYSEEKs, so the CBOs in the community. And it can include, for example, having printed material in a language other than English, can be having support staff that's available that speaks a language other than English, incorporating cultural events and other supports within the classroom or within the preschool program generally, but not the necessarily instruction in a language other than English. For help or for more detail, and particularly about dual language programs, you can contact the DOE at this inbox. Okay, so I'll let Diana answer the Q&A, and we'll quickly move forward to early learn programs. So early learn programs are programs run by the Department of Education that offer free and low cost preschool programs for children from 6 weeks old to kindergarten. So we're talking about younger than 3K and pre-K at this point. They offer extended hours, so up to 10 hours, and it's year-round services, including July and August, not just September to June. These programs are limited to qualifying families only. As we discussed, any given program can have a combination of, or any given site can have a combination of programs. Even within early learn, we said 6 weeks to kindergarten. For children who are 3, the program is considered 3K, and you apply through the 3K process, so through March 10th. For children who are 4, they are considered part of pre-K, so you apply through the pre-K process. It's really for children who are younger that there's more of a distinction between a child care seat and a Head Start seat, but across the board for these programs, you do have to qualify. And to qualify or meet the eligibility, it's based on age. Again, children from 6 weeks old to kindergarten, and based on financial need and other factors. So this includes families on public assistance or families who are low income and need childcare in order to be able to complete a job, complete an educational requirement, families with active cases with ACS, families living in temporary housing, families receiving domestic violence services. These are all different eligibility factors. Eligibility is complicated. Some families may have to pay a small fee based on a sliding scale, depending on if they were eligible, for example, based on income reasons. This can get really complicated, so do recommend that you check out some resources to see if you're eligible. You can call 311, you can contact a family welcome center, or call a child care resource and referral agency linked here. To complete the application or secure a seat, again, it's based on age. So for families of children born in 2019, explore programs and apply to programs through the pre-K application process and those options. For families born in 2020, the 3K application, and for families of children born after 2020, apply directly to the programs. You can find programs by calling My Schools, by visiting nyc.gov early learn, or even on the My Schools directory, there is the option of looking specifically for early learn programs or programs for children under 3. For help, please contact a family welcome center or contact a child care resource and referral agency. Promise NYC is a new initiative that launched in January of this year. And I know we're at time, but really want to focus on this for a moment. The child care eligibility factors that we discussed for early learn, there is an application for that program that asks families to specify that their child has legal status, legal immigration status. We know that there are many families in New York City that are immigrant families. And so unfortunately, those families were being excluded from that application process or from those programs. Promise NYC provides childcare assistance for children who are undocumented so that families can access all the 3K and pre-K program options and additional childcare options, including the early learn for children who are younger. To be eligible, a family must have a child under the age of 13. 13 seems old, but that's because it also covers after school programs for older children. Another eligibility factor is that the child is without immigration status, right? So it's not about the parents. An undocumented parent can still qualify for other forms of care if their child has immigration status. But Promise NYC is specifically for those families where the family wouldn't qualify because the child does not have qualifying status. Specifically, the child is undocumented. The other eligibility requirement is that the family income must be below 300% of the poverty level, and we've given kind of those income guidelines here. Next. To apply for Promise NYC, you should contact the agency in your borough that helps manage the program. We have the list here. So there's an agency specifically for Brooklyn, Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island. Please contact these programs directly. Calling, visiting, we've hyperlinked here if there's an inbox option for you to contact them by email, as well as when there are online surveys, ways for you to contact them. This program is temporary. Currently, it's only available through June, but we are hoping that the city renews it next year so that it can be an additional source of funding and childcare for families in future years. Head Start program are programs that also are designed to support a child in early childhood, not just educationally, but also to incorporate supports and services for the family and health, nutrition, and other services. These programs, like Early Learn, are year-round and offer extended hours, usually 8 to 10 hours. It's based on age. There's early Head Start options for pregnant mothers, infants, and toddlers, but the traditional Head Start is for children from 3 to kindergarten. Eligibility is based on having a family who is low income, in temporary housing, in foster care, or receiving public assistance. To apply to programs, you can find programs that are not run by the DOE at this hyperlink, or if a program is run by the DOE, you can apply directly or through the 3K and pre-K application. I know I'm rushing through this, so thank you for bearing with me. We'll just quickly go over the slides. Families have a right to translation and interpretation in any language that they speak. Translation is for written materials. Interpretation is for spoken word. So at meetings, for example, you have a right to these supports. All programs have access to language lines and interpretation services, all the DOE programs. If a program is not providing these supports, you can make a complaint by calling this number or contacting this inbox. Okay, and we got 2 resources finally. We covered a lot today. You can find an overview of most of the things that we covered in our early childhood education program guide for 3 and 4-year-olds. We'll send you that specific guide after this webinar when we share other materials. But we also have topics, or we have guides on varying topics, including our trilogy. These are focused on children with developmental delays or disabilities, guide to early intervention, preschool special education, and that transition to kindergarten. And for older children, we have a kindergarten admissions guide as well. Everything is on our website, linked here. Some DOE resources to help you with the process. There are family welcome centers where you can go with help for the application, help finding programs. The Office of Student Enrollment, they run this whole application process for 3K and pre-K. You can email or call them, and you can go on the DOE website to learn more about 3K, pre-K, and Early Learn. All right, so thank you for bearing with us, and thank you for bearing with me rushing through the end of the slide. Wanted to get you out at the promised time. And before you go, we'll have just one more survey for you, requesting that you give us feedback on today's presentation. Sorry, having a bit of a hard time launching it for some reason. Okay, I apologize for that. I am unable to launch the survey right now, but thank you for attending. If you can put any comments in the chat or elsewhere in the Q&A, if you found this presentation helpful, if it was easy to understand, please let us know. We covered so much material. You will be receiving a copy of these slides. You will be receiving a recording of this presentation, as well as other materials to help you navigate these processes, navigate these programs. And it's really, we appreciate you participating and helping get children into early childhood programs. As you know, we're speaking to the choir. These are critical years in a child's development. So appreciate your support in getting families enrolled in programs. Okay. And we may send you a follow-up survey because we're unable to do it now. So thank you so much.